Whispers from Below, a horror podcast by Justin W. Geis. Scary stories, both real and fake. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 13 of Whispers from Below, a podcast by a madman for madmen. I'm your resident psychopath, Justin W. Geis, and today's topic of discussion is Siren Head. Now, before I get into this episode, a couple things I want to talk about really quickly. First of all, it is very late where I am. I don't know why I keep doing this to myself, but I'm really into recording this podcast kind of late at night now. It gives me like a spooky vibe, and I'm like kind of really into it. Secondly, if you guys want to hear more about Patreon, website, Instagram, stuff like that, I always plug it at the end. So skip to the end if you want to hear about that, or listen to the episode and then listen to it at the end as well. And third of all, my rating for this episode, I would say pretty okay. I know that the last two episodes I've done have been kind of, how you say, dark. Even for me, they've been a little rough and dark. So I wanted to make sure that this week I did something a little bit lighter, a little bit more, not fun, I guess, but make-believe. Something that's not as real, not as tangible as axe murder in a house of an entire family, or a serial killer. So yeah, this week is on Siren Head, and let's jump right into it. So Siren Head is technically considered to be a hostile cryptid, though he is also considered to be a creepypasta in some circles, but he's also not a creepypasta. The definition of whether or not he is a creepypasta by technical standards, I believe he is considered not to be a creepypasta because his creator did not put that onto that website, that sort of circuit. So I think technically it's not considered a creepypasta, but for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much a creepypasta. And it's sort of made its way onto that website as time has progressed. This was created by a Canadian horror artist. His name is Trevor Henderson. And he has also written a bunch of other stories and done a bunch of other photos. Siren Head started as sort of a created photo and then morphed into stories around it. And this was done by Trevor Henderson, and he's done a couple other things. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But Siren Head has also been written as Lamphead, because in some of the depictions, instead of sirens as heads, he has lamps as heads. So Siren Head looks a lot like a tall, thin humanoid, extremely desiccated, dehydrated. He's got, it doesn't really have a gender. It's got mummified skin. It's extremely tall, very, very, very tall, probably the size of a building, but very, very thin. And then instead of a head, it has dual sirens attached to a stick. It sounds weird, but look up a picture of it and it'll make way more sense to you what it's supposed to look like. You should look up a picture of it. I promise that it'll make way more sense. So Siren Head is an extremely aggressive and skilled predator. The degree of intelligence that it has is kind of unknown, I guess. But we do know that it is intelligent enough to camouflage within the forests, and it's very talented at that. And it's also intelligent enough to mimic sounds that it hears, so that it can hide from its predators and to lure in prey. Mostly it'll use this as sort of the voice of a loved one or a close friend or an animal that'll sort of make you feel comfortable, to lure you in, and then it'll trap you. Sort of if you guys remember, or if you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. I believe it was a season 1 episode about skinwalkers, They do a similar thing, sort of mimicking those that you love to sort of lure you into letting them in, or drawing them close, or things like that. Similar sort of vibe. The thing that is across the board, hands down, always a thing, is that they have a very strong will to survive. We also know that it doesn't always kill to eat, which is interesting. So it does eat, although sometimes when I read things, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, I've also read that it doesn't eat, but it does eat, but it doesn't eat. So we'll talk about that. There's a bunch of different interpretations, I guess. But supposedly it does need sustenance somehow. But sometimes it just kills for sport, which means that at some point it has to be a very intelligent being. The way that it kills people is sort of debated. It does have a lot of strength and it's extremely fast, so that could be part of it as well. But we do know that it uses its sirens to drown out the sounds of its victims. So like as it's killing you, as like a last sort of like haha, it'll make sounds that sort of cover up your cries and screams of pain, so that nobody can come look for you. So that's kind of messed up. But also like very impressive. It has to be an intelligent creature if it's doing stuff like that, you know? Siren Head has no official way to reproduce that we are aware of. So that's like, it can't really be a species unless it's man-made, which is disproven. It can also burst the eardrums of those who wander too close. And there's also a report of it basically murdering an entire town in the sort of way of bursting eardrums. It also, people had reports of bleeding from their sinuses, their eyeballs had burst, their eardrums were shattered, they had their gums were bleeding, teeth were broken, but mostly in the facial region. So it has a strong enough sound vibration. I don't really understand science, but strong enough sound of some sort that it can deal massive damage like that. It was proposed to the SCP Foundation as a possible SCP, and it had a number, but it was ultimately rejected by the Foundation, because it sort of kind of already was claimed by the Creepypasta group. So for those of you that don't know, and let me know if you want to hear episodes on this, SCP Foundation is sort of similar to Creepypasta, but a little bit more like sci-fi-y, a little bit more abstract. Creepypasta is definitely more like spooky stories. SCP is just bizarre. It's really hard to explain. You should look it up. They're really fascinating. If you want me to do episodes on that, let me know. I've gotten maybe like one request for it. But if it's something that you guys would love to listen to, please let me know. I'll definitely do an episode on it. It also doesn't have a gender, which I love. We love a no-gendered queen, can relate. And nobody really knows if it contains any organs to digest the things that it's hunting. But inside of the two sirens that are on top of the head, there are mouths with like teeth. So it at least has like a mouth that it could potentially use to eat, and chew food. So it could have organs and digest things, but also like maybe it doesn't. No one's like super sure. And then I wrote again, it's technically not a creepypasta, but like it is, but like it isn't. But regardless, Siren Head is definitely very creepy looking. You should look up a picture of it because it sounds silly. Like it's a human body with like siren heads, but when you look at it, it's very unnerving. Like there's something about the image of it that's like really creepy and like I don't know. There's maybe it's just me, but something about it makes me feel like uncomfy. There are two like photographs of it done by the original artist Trevor Henderson that exist, and it can be seen standing in a graveyard. It looked like a graveyard. I'm assuming it's a graveyard. It's extremely tall. It's very very thin, and it's got these long like sort of like Slender Man fingers and hands, like very tall, thin, lanky sort of vibe. I also read in a separate account that it's been known to change its appearance based on the environment it's in, Or alternatively, there are subspecies of it. So I was reading something that said that there have been reports of it. This is why it's also called lamphead. There have been reports of it instead of the sirens as the two heads. There have been like almost like lamp posts as the two heads with mouths where like the light bulb would be. Um, and so the idea of it sort of changing to match the urban environment that it's in could potentially give it way more power than we had initially thought. But also, there could just be subspecies of it, which means that it's not the last of its kind and there's multiple of them. But if it's just one of them, then it's a shapeshifter. So, either way, it's bad for us. We just don't know, like, how bad. Like, I don't know. It's like trying to choose like the lesser of two evils. Like either way is bad, but like which kind of bad do you want? Or like which kind of bad would be less? That there's more of them or that there's one of them that's way more powerful? Take your pick. I don't like either option if I'm being totally honest. The other thing to note is that the only inorganic piece of the siren head is the actual sirens. Everything else is like humanoid. And then there's also been a report from Trevor Henderson stating that there are also like cassette tapes and a tape recorder in its body to sort of explain how it can mimic sounds that it hears. So it hears it, it records it, then plays it back on the tape recorder sort of thing, and then blasts it out of the sirens. So the only inorganic material that's in it would be the tape recorder and the cassette tapes, as well as the siren heads. But then that brings into question if it's so skinny and like emaciated and stuff, and then it has the tape recorder in it, like there's no space for organs. So how does it eat? Slash, like, what does it eat? Or does it eat at all? Because if it's killing humans, is it only killing them for sport? Because it ignores other animals. Like, that's the other thing about it that's weird. Is like, it completely ignores other animals. It only focuses on humans. So then my question is like, if it's only focusing on humans but it doesn't eat them, is it just like a hunter? Does it just like kill us because it can? If it's real. And maybe it's real. Who knows if it's real? But still, I mean, that's kind of messed up. I don't know about you, but I personally hate having to go to the grocery store. It takes up so much of my day when I could be starting a new hobby with that time, like soap carving, or collecting the sick bags out of airplanes. With Instacart, it makes grocery shopping fast and easy, all while allowing me to stay in my underwear. Instacart allows you to order all of the things you usually get from your local stores, delivered to your door in as fast as 1 hour. Not only that, but it will also give you smart suggestions for new items based off of your preferences, as well as highlight deals to help you save some money. The shoppers handpick perfect produce and make sure that your eggs get to you safely. You can get free delivery on your first order over $35 by following the link in the show notes. This also lets Instacart know that we sent you, and it helps support Whispers from Below. So if you hate grocery shopping as much as I do, try Instacart today and enjoy getting your groceries the easy way. So I mentioned this earlier too, but I thought it was just good to note that Trevor Henderson has actually wrote other creations as well, including Longhorse, Bonesworth, Bridgeworm, and a ton of other ones. For those of you that are like creepypasta fanatics or any sort of like spooky fanatic, I'm sure you've heard of these things. Like I know for a fact I've heard of Longhorse and Bonesworth. So, you know, he's done a lot of cool stuff for that sort of like niche community, which is kind of cool. Um, the other thing, now back to Siren Head. I was doing like, I know this seems kind of out of place and out of order. Let me sort of explain how this research process went. There was not a ton of information on one page like I can normally find. And then I'll fact check on other pages to make sure that I'm correct. Every page said something different. So I started by writing down all the stuff on one page, then the next page, and the next page. So I know it seems like I'm sort of repeating things or I'm bouncing back and forth between ideas. It's because I am, because every website was kind of like giving me a different vibe, a different idea, but I wanted to give you the listener, the whole picture of what I found. And I thought that that was only fair to do by giving you all the info rather than picking and choosing the things that I liked. I wanted to give you as much info as possible about Siren Head because I think it's interesting. But there's definitely stuff I probably missed. So if there's stuff I missed, let me know. Or also just like go do some research and learn about it. I mean, I love this podcast because I get to learn so much, but you can also go and learn some cool stuff too in case I missed anything. But anyway, so going back, I also read that if we are going with the idea that it can change its appearance at any time, so it's one thing that is extremely powerful and can change its appearance, that does mean that it can change its appearance based on the victims. So this theory would mean that the victims would sort of choose and pick and choose what Siren Head would look like. Not consciously, of course. It would be an unconscious decision, and Siren Head would make the choice of how to present itself best to hunt the prey. But I do think it's interesting to think of that because now that takes this creature from just being like a weird thing that's in the woods to like more of a sentient being that is planning, it's making plans to kill you, not just like deciding that you walked into the forest so like it's your fault for stumbling upon it. No, it will like come hunt you. I just find that like really interesting. I mentioned this earlier, but there was an incident reported where an entire town was found dead with bursted eardrums, bleeding eyes, sinuses, ears, stuff like that. I found this on multiple websites. So this incident report, quote unquote, is definitely like, as far as like fact checking goes for Siren Head, I would consider it to be canon with sort of the Siren Head lore. Because I found it on a couple different websites as I was researching, so I would say that's definitely a thing. The other thing I read was that there is not a possibility that Siren Head was ever human and then transformed into this. It's too intelligent. It's too outlandish. The body proportions don't make sense. There's no way that it was physically human, but the belief is that it probably changed its bottom half to remain humanoid as a way to sort of blend in, quote unquote, even though it doesn't. That could mean that it's not a hyper intelligent being. And so the bottom part that's more humanoid is there as a sort of like safety thing for us as humans to get closer to it. I don't think that that's probably why. I think that's probably just how it's biologically built. Um and that's why it's that way, and maybe it can only shapeshift the top portion, which seems weird but like also could like make sense in my head cuz like it seems weird that it would only be able to shapeshift that part of its body, but also like we can only like close our hand into a fist, one way. Our knees don't bend backwards. Like maybe that's just how its body works. You know what I mean? Maybe that explanation didn't make sense. Like our bodies do a thing and we know that it does a thing and that's cool. Like we can close our hand into a fist, but we can't like close our hand into a fist backwards. Our knees bend one way. Like we can't bend them the other way. So maybe it can shapeshift its head, but it can't shapeshift anything else because that's just not how it functions. I don't know. That makes sense in my head. Um, this was where I read that it absorbs creatures into its body. So it's more of like a blobby sort of like swallow the creature whole scenario versus like a eaty, chewy the creature sort of thing. I don't know. I think I'm gonna go with it eats things because it has a mouth and like teeth. Um, but then this website was also saying that like it's a creature that doesn't conform to like the reality of space and the universe and time, and it is like an all-knowing, all-seeing, uh all-powerful creature that can like hunt whenever it wants and eh, just like crazy stuff. And I was like, this seems like this has gone off that deep end because I don't really know if this is true. But then like Trevor Henderson kind of like alluded to that and also like was like, no, I mean, that's kind of right. So it's basically like this all powerful creature, like Cthulhu style, that like can just like devour entire towns just by like screaming. That is so scary. I know I mentioned this earlier, but again, I saw this again. So fact checking, this makes sense to me. It ignores animals and only hunts humans. So it completely ignores the other fauna around. It only focuses in on humans. So something about the human, maybe because we're bipedal, maybe it's because we speak, maybe I'm not sure what sort of draws it in. I would assume it would be the speech if we're talking about Siren Head with sirens. It would make sense to me that speech would be something that would sort of like trigger it or like make it curious enough to us, and then it can sort of steal us away, and maybe we're good sustenance, we're like a main food source, we're cocky, we're arrogant, stuff like that. um the other thing that's really scary that I read is that there are no known weapons that work on Siren Head. So I've read that like people have tried to kill it, it hasn't worked, and then they've died. I've also read there's only like a few accounts of people actually surviving a Siren Head encounter. And they're very skeptical about it. They're like, you didn't actually see it or you wouldn't be here. Like it's an extremely deadly creature. Um, so yeah, definitely look up a picture of it and like read more about it. It's really interesting. And the initial pictures that Trevor Henderson made are really cool to look at. He did a pretty good job with them, and it's sort of cool to see how they developed. But that's pretty much all I have today. I know that this is a little bit of a shorter episode than I normally do. But Siren Head is a very mysterious creature and there's not a lot of information on it. But I did actually get a request to do this. I can't remember from who, it was ages ago. But this wasn't my idea. It was put on a list at some point before I started doing like huge shout outs for episode ideas. So if this was you that sent it to me, I'm so sorry. Please message me and I will shout you out. Because this was really cool to research. It was a really fascinating one. Um, and if you guys want to see more like creepypasta content or mythos content, urban legend, stuff like that, please let me know. These are some of my favorite episodes to do. I love this sort of universe, and I love expanding upon it and learning more about it. Along the same vein, if you have any episode ideas, please let me know. You can let me know on my website. There's a contact page. It's whispersfrombelow.com. You can go to the contact page and give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas, anything you want through there. On that website, there's also merch, and you can download episodes. It's pretty cool. You should definitely go check it out. You can also let me know through Instagram. It's at Whispers from Below. No spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing. Feel free to send me a message on there if you have any episode ideas. I've gotten a couple episode ideas recently on there that are on my list, and I'm going to do them soon. So stay tuned for stuff like that. But I'm a Gen Z. My phone is like always near me. So like I'll pretty much always respond. If you're interested in my personal life at all, you can check out at JUTIN_geese, like the animal. It's basically right now just like me living my best makeup covered bald headed life. Um, so you can go check that out. It's it's not anything super special, but I just like put on a lot of makeup and I have no hair. That's pretty much my personal life, and you get to see my political opinions on there. The other thing I want to talk about is the Patreon. Currently, we are not close to our goal, and I would absolutely love to be close. My podcast is reaching its 1 year anniversary. Cheers, cheers, cheers. It will be reaching its 1 year anniversary in February, and I would love to get 25 patrons on the Patreon if possible. The lowest tier is starting at $5, and you get a mention on the Whispers from Below website, and I send you like a little personalized message, and you are forever in my heart. There's also a $10 tier, a $15 tier, a $25 tier, a $50 tier, and a $100 tier. There's all sorts of cool stuff on there. You should definitely go check it out. It's patreon.com/whispersfrombelow. I'm very proud of the stuff that I've put on there. I think it's really, really awesome. There's patron-only merch and stickers and water bottles that are personalized, and it's really, really cool. So please go check it out if you haven't already. And even if you just want to make a one-time donation, that's like $1. That's also like greatly appreciated, because the more funding and the more support I can get for this podcast, the bigger it can get, the more it can grow. I have a lot of huge ideas for this podcast, but I need your guys' help. If you can't support me on Patreon, the best thing you can do is just share this podcast, whether it be on social media or via word of mouth. Please, please, please just share this podcast. It would mean the world to me if you guys would just talk about it, if you love it, because I love doing it and I want other people to love it. So anyway, I'm done. I'm done with my rambling. I'm done with my plugging. So remember, Siren Head is apparently an all-powerful creature that we should all be afraid of. Secondly, is it better to have less or more? Is it better to have one that's super powerful and can shapeshift, or more, but like have subspecies of it? I'm not really sure. And three, continue to wear a mask. It's not just about your safety, it's about the safety of others. Please be considerate.